Hello, my name is Count Lovenstein and I am going to have a look around the Museum of Computing History at Black Slough 2475445 in Second Life and see what's there. Let's see. Here two first. Unfortunately, for some reason it seems to be taking an extreme amount of time for the textures to bake. Admiral Grace Hopper Auditorium. Admiral Grace Hopper, when she was a young woman way back when in the 60s, invented the first compiler. I don't think it was quite a fully functional compiler by 2023, 24, I should say, standards, but certainly it was the first thing of that kind at the time. Story of Tetris. Alan Turing, I presume, doesn't need much introduction. Alan Turing was the first person to come up with the idea of a universal calculating machine. I don't think he was actually even planning on engineering such a machine. He was just looking at whether one could be built in theory, and kind of look at the nature of how calculations happen. And it was a far cry from modern computers that operate in 0 and 1 logic. It had, I can't remember offhand, but it had quite a number of different states. Alexei Pachanyov, I'm going to guess, is the Russian engineer who created Tetris, and I believe never received any money for it, because in the USSR copyright tended to belong to the government, not to the creator. Yeah. And the original Tetris, I don't think it quite all the bells and whistles that the one that appeared in the amusement arcades later did. Oh, there we go. And Tetris themed couches. Right, let's see what else I've got. Early pre-PC computing exhibit. That was like an abacus, yeah. Pre-electronic. A Jacquard loom. So the Jacquard loom was actually programmable using punch cards, and it operated in something quite similar to binary in modern computers. A difference engine, that was a mechanical computer developed by Charles Babbage in the 19th century, who I believe he was actually influenced by the Jacquard loom. But he wanted to get government funding to start building huge versions of it. It was a programmable computer, and it could potentially have started the information age 100 years earlier, but by all accounts, when he went to Parliament to try to get funding, he was so utterly obnoxious and superior that they ended up telling him to piss off. The bomb, that was built at Bletchley Park. It was a team that Alan Turing was part of. It was created to crack German Enigma codes. Not quite sure how it worked. And there's the Enigma machine itself. I believe it would just basically brute force all the combinations till I got the right one. Now this one I do know a little bit more about. This is an Apollo guidance computer. So it worked those verb and noun buttons. So in the lunar module, I've had some experience of simulating this. So say you are on the lunar surface and you wanted to initiate a takeoff, you would type in verb 37, which starts a new program, noun 12, which is the program you want to start, and enter it, and it would start a countdown, which you would then confirm. There was a proceed button somewhere, which appears to be missing from this handset. The readouts would appear on the screen here. It was like octal registers like you would see in a calculator in the old days. ENIAC. This one I don't know much about at all. I know that it was built in the USA, and I believe it was extremely huge and expensive, and I think it operated in valves. I don't think there was any solid state microprocessors of any description at this time. But like I say, it's not a machine I know anything about, so I don't want to make any sweeping comments. IBM 360. In the late 60s and early 70s, you had a kind of generation of these mainframe computers. So you would input with this keyboard here, and I believe this would print out rolls of paper by way of an output. Magnetic tape was the preferred storage medium at one point. When I worked in the aerospace industry years ago, we had to get rid of a warehouse full of these tapes. It was really heavy, cumbersome, boring, tedious work, and really frustrating because the whole fucking warehouse of these reels would probably fit on a tiny USB key nowadays. Punch cards, this used to be how you would input data. And what's this one? Univac. Again, that's a machine that I know next to nothing about. HP series. TechVax. Digital became really big in the 80s and 90s. These VAX computers, they were pretty cool at the time. I've never had a shot of one of them, only in emulation. PDP-11, that was a famous one. Again, digital. And the PDP-11, they, considering how old they are, like they were around in the 70s, early 80s, and they were comparable in power to like Amiga 1200s from the 1990s. Of course, you would never have afforded one of these back then. They cost huge amounts of money. Touch to receive free museum beer.
Shall we play a game?
That, shall we play a game? That's from Wargames, the Whopper computer, or Joshua as it was otherwise known. The one that decides to, or thinks it's in a thermonuclear war. Compilers, interpreters, assemblers. So what a compiler does is basically, to put it in very, very simple terms, it turns a high-level language into machine code. So yeah, your high-level language will be turned into an executable program by compiler. Interpreter. And assembly language was big in the they were still using assembly language until pretty recently. I don't know if people still use it now, but it was a good kind of intermediary point between what the machines liked and what was readable to the humans. Like in an 8-bit computer like a Commodore 64, if you were to program an assembly language rather than BASIC, it would run 100 times faster because it was much closer to the low-level machine language. Going with jump commands, they would make the program counter jump to another memory register, store Y, load Y, jump to subroutine, store accumulator, load accumulator. The accumulator was a register, if I remember rightly, on the processor that you could put numbers in and bring numbers out of. Man, this is where it's faster than BASIC because, or one of the reasons, it's using hex, and converting hex into binary is much quicker and easier than converting decimal into binary. I should say, by the way, I am not any kind of expert coder, and I am not pretending to be. I'm just someone that dabbles in it and takes an interest in all things computer related. So there you are, your high level language, translate to assembly language, translate to machine language, and output. Basic. Let's see what this is. Wow. 2020 basic. That could be worth a little look at. I used to play around with basic quite a lot in the 1980s, so I kind of know the syntax of it. Swift, SQL, I think it's pronounced SQL. It's a language known for writing databases in. Python. We've tried playing around with Python. We've got a fairly decent book, Python for Dummies, that goes through some of your kind of variable typecasting and memory management and stuff as you do it in Python. It'll be fun to play around with. Pascal. Well, there's an interesting one, London scripting language. That's the scripting language used in Second Life to put scripts into objects and make them do your bidding. If you can use that in Second Life, you can do magic tricks. You're a magician. Java, Fortran, COBOL. Business orientated language. Fortran, if I remember rightly, was short for Formula Translator, which I presume would be something you would use for maths. C#, you'll use that in Unity among other things. Unity scripts tend to like being written in C#. C++, I think C++ is your kind of shit-hot coder's usual weapon of choice these days. Way above my head. I've tried playing about with C and realised that it was going to take me fucking years to start getting a grip of it. Commodore 64 Basic. That was a PC, well, a computer I should say, that I had in the 1980s, and it was really cool. Loads of great games for it, and even now there's still a thriving demo scene in the Commodore 64 where people have them doing really cool stuff that you probably wouldn't imagine they'd be able to back in the 80s. Ada Lovelace is credited with writing the first computer program, and she did it for Charles Babbage's difference engine. She was also the daughter of Byron the poet. Rockwell, if I remember rightly, were famous for making modems back in the day. Moss brought out the 6502 processor, 8-bit processor, very, very popular at the kind of turn of the 80s, 70s into the 80s. Commodore built a lot of machines with them, and the Apple II, I think, was MOS 6502. At one point, it was the best-selling processor in the world. The Altair 880, that was the first kind of normal person could afford, to have in their house computer. It ran a version of BASIC that was created by none other than William Gates of Microsoft. Xerox Alto, if I remember rightly, and feel free to correct me on anything I say here that's wrong, and I will put the corrections in the video description. But Xerox, I don't know if it was this particular machine, but they created the first computer GUI that was operated with a mouse pointer and all the kind of stuff that we still take for granted today. The ZX81, you've got the first computer that was under 100 quid. Now 100 quid in 1980 was still a fair amount of money, but it was much more affordable than things like the Apple II and the Commodore PET, which, I mean, they still costed thousands of pounds of today's money. Excuse me. Speak and spell. TRS-80. I remember hearing about them at the time, but I never got a chance to have a shot at one of them. And they've got your early IBM PCs. What in an HP? IBM Data Master. Now we're getting into, don't know whether these are 5¼ inch or 8-inch floppy disks, but definitely getting into the floppy disk era anyway. These ones I don't remember anything about. BBC Micros I was familiar with. They were designed by Acorn, who went on to design the ARM chip, which I believe to this day is still the best selling computer chip of all time. It is basically in every fucking mobile device that you'll ever find on the planet, just about. It had a reduced instruction set, which meant it could run at much lower power and didn't require to be fan cooled, which is why it's good for mobile devices like phones. Oh, the BBC Micro, it was designed for the British government's computer in every school project, in a very uncharacteristic fit of progressive thinking. The Conservative government of the 1980s had realised that computers were going to be extremely big in the coming years, and that computer literacy was going to be highly important. Commodore PET, that was the first computer I ever had a shot of. My father, his work had one. They seemed to have some kind of syndicate with it where they all take a week about having it in their house. So I don't know if they maybe all kind of threw money in a pot for it or whatever, but it was very expensive at the time. I mean, it was like you would have got a small car, I think, for the same amount of money. It was not an inconsequential thing to get to play around with one of these in the 1970s. And the Apple II, I presume that needs no introduction. That was the real beginning of home computing in the USA. Built by Steve Wozniak, rather, in it was either him or Steve Jobs' family garage. That one I have no clue, I don't remember that at all. The Apple One. So the Apple One, if I remember rightly, was basically a kit. You had to build it yourself from parts that you would order from Apple. Heathkit I have no memory of or ken back. The Atari ST, however, and the Amiga, that's another matter. And the Commodore 128, I remember them well. I still think the Amiga is possibly the coolest computer ever built. These were when home computers started moving to 16-bit, so compared to your early Commodores and ZX Spectrums and all that, it was quite a leap in computing power. I remember when I got my first Amiga thinking it'll never get better than this. It had a full half meg of memory, which I felt was wild beyond the dreams of avarice at the time. The Atari ST, I had a play around with one of my friends' Atari STs. Never owned one, but he had some pretty cool, for the time, video capturing equipment on it. It could record a few seconds of what nowadays would be pretty low grade looking video, but at the time it was really something, really cool. Apple Macintosh, they were pretty good for kind of desktop publishing stuff. I think I'm right in saying, I could be wrong in this and I'm happy again to stand corrected, but where they outperformed the Atari ST and Amiga, which the Amiga had more memory, faster processor, more colours and all that. But what made this ideal for desktop publishing was that it had scalable fonts. So in the Amiga, if you scaled the fonts up, they get blockier and blockier the bigger they were, whereas this thing actually had proper scalable fonts. The Lisa I don't know too much about, but from what I understand it was an absolute disaster from the financial point of view, although by all accounts a very good machine at the time. But seemingly Jobs was so fussy when he built this machine that by the time it actually was ready to sell any fucking units, it was already obsolete. ZX Spectrum, that was in Britain possibly the most popular home computer of the 80s. This is actually an upgraded version, the Plus 2, that was built by Amstrad. The original Spectrum was a wee tiny thing with rubber keys. In fact, I think I might have one of them. So yeah, that is the original Sinclair ZX Spectrum. Rubber keys that gave you arthritis, but it was really cheap. I mean, it was like a quarter of the price of a Commodore 64, and yet it had 48k of memory, and it ran some of the coolest games at the time. I mean, considering how cheap they were, it really was a fucking phenomenal piece of kit. That had actually the basic commands. I don't know if you can see that on the keys. So, if you wanted to put in a command like go to, for example, you would just press G and the whole go to command would come up, and then you would put in your operands, but you weren't actually sitting like this typing. You'd no, push keys and whole words would appear. Right, let's see what else we've got. Oh yeah, been here. I've been there. I don't know if I've been... Oh! TI 994A. My uncle had one of them. They were quite cool. Quite powerful, I think, for the time, but if I remember rightly, they had some serious quality control issues. Like the one he bought only lasted for a few months and then it was fucked. But he had a lot of stuff for it in cartridges, so it was pretty cool. MSX. I think that was a Japanese computer. It was kind of like their version of the Spectrum or the Commodore 64. Don't know what kind of processor was in it. TRS color computer. Do not have a clue about that one. Them's 880, 8080 I should say, 808. I'm gonna guess that that's an early Intel processor. Yeah, aye. That's what the CPM operating system. So 75, my god, that's early. Basic, Fortran and DOS. 64K DRAM. Wow. That's really quite an impressive machine for the time. It must have been pretty expensive, I would imagine. Anyway. That's the Commodore 64. I think I've already spoken about that. That was... I can never decide whether I think the Commodore 64 or the Amiga is the coolest computer I've ever seen. What's that? Oh, Ken and Roberta Williams, if I remember rightly, they set up Sierra games. Yeah, Sierra Online. They started off, Roberta Williams, if I recall this correctly, had decided to write an adventure game, but graphic adventure game, but she didn't know how to code it, so she'd given it to her husband who turned her concept into a actual working game, and the rest is history. Scott Adams, I remember him. He wrote the Pirates Cove. I think it had many names and many different computers. In the VIC-20 it was called Pirates Cove. It came in a cartridge, and it was a long running kind of text adventure where you had to build a ship and go find buried treasure with a pirate's map. The Voodoo Castle, I remember, there's Pirate Adventure there by Scott Adams. I remember that, I remember Voodoo Castle, I don't remember Zork. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I remember as a book, set of books in a TV program rather than a game. And was it Sierra that made Half-Life later on in the 90s? 100% sure on that, could be wrong. Get a Lamp, that's a documentary film that was made about the old text adventure games. And I'll press this button. Oh yeah, that's it. Well, it did tell me not to press it, and I would go ahead and do it anyway. Data center. Connection machine. No idea what that is. IBM Z900. Simple database. Yeah, these things are either way before my time or way out of my price range.
Greetings.
Been out of that. Computers and telecom. Satellite communications. These are getting a bit more modern looking CD-ROM drives and 3.5-inch floppies. Plato. I have no idea what that is. Well, there's some of the people. Ken Thompson, I think, was he not one of the guys behind Unix? And Richard Hamming, I'm guessing, Hamming as in signal processing's possibly named after him. Yeah. What the hell, he worked on the Manhattan Project. Probably should know who these guys are, but I'm afraid I don't. Tim Berners-Lee, don't imagine he needs much introduction. He's credited with being the father of the World Wide Web. Thomas Flowers built Colossus, which was instrumental in cracking German codes in World War II. Steve Jobs, I assume, needs no introduction. Him I've seen on YouTube videos discussing AIs. I don't really know a great deal about him. Richard Stallman, he is the he created the GNU, which is essentially or was the front end of Linux. And he set up the Free Software Foundation. He was a proponent of free and open software. He fundamentally disagrees with any closed or proprietary software and refuses to use any. And with Linux, with Linus Torvalds, they created the GNU plus Linux. Linux was the kernel, and GNU was your kind of front-end software like Emacs and various other things. Obviously it's come on considerably since then. It's my preference actually to use Linux, and most of my PCs, I've got two in the house with Windows on them. The one I'm filming this on being one of them. John von Neumann created or conceptualized the kind of computer architecture, you know, your processor, RAM, front side bus, all that. Linus Torvalds, as I've already mentioned, he created the Linux kernel. These two I'm not familiar with. Bill Gates, I'm sure, also needs no introduction. Bob Noyce, his company were they were big into semiconductors, transistors, microprocessors. Wozniak created the Apple and Apple II. I know that name and I recognise that face, but I can't remember what it was he actually did, even though I know I should remember it. Margaret Hamilton did a lot of the programming and the guidance computers for the Apollo missions. Don't know them. Don't know them. Claude Shannon, when it comes to information theory, he's the man. I believe it was him that figured out that you could send and receive any signal using just zeros and ones, two voltage states on a rough. He was also involved in creating Nyquist-Shannon theorem, which is big in signal processing. Any audio engineer should be able to tell you about it. In its most basic form, or the most basic explanation of it, it tells you the amount of cycles per second you need a sampler to work out in order to digitally recreate a signal with no errors. Now, everyone probably knows that a CD or a PCM WAV file tend to work at 44.1 cycles per second. Sorry, kilocycles per second. That's because the human ear can hear up to 20 kilocycles per second. And Nyquist-Shannon theorem says that you need to sample at double the highest frequency in your sample in order to have no aliasing errors. In other words, to create a digital sample without errors in it. There's a lot to that, but it's really difficult to explain in anything approaching plain English. Alan Turing and Grace Hopper again. Conrad Zuse. I've got a feeling I should know who Conrad Zuse is. Oh, he built the first fully functional programmable Turing complete computer. He was a German civil engineer. Grace Hopper, already spoke about, was involved in compilers. Alan Turing, Universal Turing Machine. I wonder if there's a diagram here. Yeah, so a look at this. You can get the link from up there. This goes to show you 5 tuple assembled code, M configurations, F squares, E squares. You're not dealing with simple 0, 1 like modern computers. I'm fairly sure if that was still the way of it, Grand Theft Auto 6 would have been a much longer time in coming, but who knows. I'm not, as I said earlier, pretending to be any kind of big expert. Ada Lovelace again. And just out of interest, I'm sure you can actually get Ada Lovelace first computer program. wiki page maybe. Let's go to the images. Oh, there it is. Let's see if I can open this in a new tab for a better view. There we are. So this is Ada Lovelace's first computer program for the computation by the engine of the numbers of Bernoulli. So, I mean, I'm not the world's greatest mathematician, but it looks a far cry from Python. Anyway. Charles Babbage, he built the hardware that Ada Lovelace's program we just looked at was to run on. Charles, no, that's not Charles Babbage, that's Charles Babbage. George Bull here. He was the guy that Boolean algebra is named after, Boolean logic. These guys, again, I don't know. I have a feeling I absolutely should, but can't remember everything. Blaise Pascal. Brian Jernigan, Dennis Ritchie, I think they might have been involved with Unix. Oh no, they C. They developed C, wow. There you go. No doubting their contribution to modern computing then. Philip Rosedale, you definitely couldn't miss him out here. He's a guy who was behind Second Life. Nolan Bushnell, Atari. I'm going to hazard a guess that Gordon Moore's the guy behind Moore's Law. And Seymour Cray is the guy behind the Cray supercomputers. I'm going to guess. I don't really have time to speak of all of them. I'm going to look up wiki pages for all of them. I've already I've been talking for over an hour. So who's this chap? If that texture would bake, we could find out. Oh, it's Charles Babbage, a bust of Charles Babbage, father of computing. Yeah, literally, if he had been given funding by the government to start mass producing his engines, the information age, it's not an exaggeration to say, could have started a century earlier, and then who knows where we would be right at the moment. Video games. Pac-Man. Spy Hunter, that was a good one. Tron, that was a good one too. Space Invaders, that was the first video game with an interactive soundtrack. It was a very simple interactive soundtrack. When the wee minis got closer and speeded up, it changed the duh 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 duh. Golden Axe was one of my favourites when I was a kid. It was like Conan the Barbarian style side scroller. You had to kind of use various weird means to travel through this land. At one point you jump in the back of a giant turtle, then you fly off in the back of an enormous hawk, and so on. Sounds a bit silly, but the way they worked it together, it was actually quite cool. Doom. That was the first kind of like real proper pseudo 3D, proper pseudo 3D contradiction in terms. Quake, you got same company made Quake, then you're getting into real 3D gaming, proper 3D engines. Street Fighter 2 was a really simple game but really popular, just basically a street brawl between you and another character, and it got increasingly difficult the more of them that you beat. Well, here we've got our Xboxes, Sega Saturn, Dreamcast, Xbox 360. Go away. PlayStations. Got one of these sitting in the living room. PlayStation 4. I used to have these, the first PlayStations you could buy wee chips, and there was 3 points in the board that you soldered onto it, and then it would let you play dodgy copied games which you could make with a CD writer. And that was actually my last time of getting into that kind of stuff. After that I retired from it. Nintendo 64. There was a great James Bond game for the Nintendo 64. And a great Mario game. Pong, that was I think that was an original Atari game, wasn't it? Somehow I think Atari get, and they were doing absolutely brilliant stuff, then they get taken over by, was it Warner Brothers or something? They get taken over by some nest of corporate vultures anyway, and after that they just fucking run the company into the ground. There was a famous story of the pit with all the unsold Atari games buried in it. Absolutely shameful stuff. Right, Virtual Worlds exhibit. Metaverse. extended reality, mixed reality, augmented reality. Having had some experience with virtual reality, I don't really see that being the way ahead. People just don't want to sit with a headset on for hours and end, and they don't want to get motion sickness, which tries they might. They don't seem to have been able to find any way around. It's really cool. I'd accessed a virtual reality machine through my work, and it's really cool to play around with for about an hour, and then you get fed up having your eyes and ears covered, and it's uncomfortable, and you get tired of it. However, augmented reality, that might be another story, because augmented reality doesn't actually decouple you from your environment. It more augments what you already see round about you. But we'll see, remains to be seen. There's Second Life, which is what I'm making this video on. I don't see much point in starting to blabber on for another 10 minutes about Second Life, because anyone who's got this far into the video has already been watching it for an hour and a quarter. It's a really cool place to build stuff. It's kind of like Lego or Minecraft for adults. Roblox, Rec Room. So, Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse was kind of an attempt to create Web3, as they call it, and turn the whole web into something like what you're looking at now, but it's not something I think most people really want. I mean, when you're navigating the web, for most applications, you're better off with a 2D screen and the text. When you can see, for example, if you look at this as an example, if I wanted to find the BBC Micro that I was looking at earlier, I've got to walk around this building like so until I happen to find it. Whereas with a 2D text screen like Google search engine, you would just type in BBC Micro and be taken straight to it. So, I could be wrong, but I really don't see the kind of metaverse thing going anywhere as taking over the web's concerned. It's something that I think's amusing for geeks and hobbyists. Now we're into AI territory now. Marvin Minsky. He was one of the early pioneers. There you go. First neural network, 79. AI, frankly, I have some concerns about. I don't think it's going to turn round and decide to wipe out humanity and take over the world one day and start shooting people, because that's just not how it works. But I think misbehaving humans will use it to do nasty things to each other. And most obviously things like putting people out of work. Could also be used to do cyber attacks and terrorist attacks and various other nasty things and deep fakes. There's a lot of shitty things you can that people will be able to do to each other with it. Anyway, that's me right back at the beginning now, and I've been talking non-stop for an hour and 20 minutes nearly, so I think we'll call it a day here.